All right, Nick, let's talk about the Miami Hurricanes. This is a team that had went all in this offseason. They've put all the NIL dollars, got all the players. They've assembled a top-notch squad, and now we finally got to see that team hit the field week one. I think this was big news for Miami, and we've got a story highlighting just that. I'm Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, Miami Hurricanes got some great news week one versus the Florida Gators. That this big time NIL investment they made is finally paying off. Let's get into the article and we can talk about it more on the other side. This is from over on CBS Sports. It says, "Nobody really likes to talk about the starting point," Cristobal told reporters after the game. "I knew when I got to Miami there was a lot of work to do, and these guys, they've been through a lot. And they made the decision it was enough. They've had enough, and they were going to prove that by the way they played the game. The starting point was Miami going all in the NIL era. The school was paying Cristobal $80 million over 10 years. Booster John Rees injected his largesse into the scene. Kane's connection was formed in reaction to what it took to compete in the NIL space. That space is more defined now. Kane's connection has an intended goal of raising $10 million a year. That's half the total it took to assemble Ohio State's roster, according to Buckeyes AD Ross Bork. What chance then does Miami have to compete at that level? Ohio State, you saw what they did in the transfer portal, Burr said. We kind of did the same thing. In a modern day college football, you're not going to be competitive if you don't have full alignment on your NIL. I think this just shows, Nick, that Miami, they put some big investments into NIL. They put their trust into it. And it's really looking like those moves have paid off. Curious what your thoughts are on this one. But before we get to you, Nick, Miami fans, in the comment section below, this is a team who really did a lot of great things in week one. But coming into week two, we want to know what your thoughts are. So let us know. Week two, Miami Hurricanes. What do you think the final score to this one is going to be? Is it going to be as bad as they beat the Florida Gators? Will it be worse? I think there's potential there for this team to really start to get rolling. Let us know your predictions of the score in the comment section below. But Nick, what do you think about these NIL contributions towards Miami?
So when I heard this story, and we all watched Miami, of course, prior to that, dismantle the Florida Gators at the Swamp, I think the thing that really jumped out at me, especially after the end of the weekend of college football, was how far Miami has separated itself from its competition in the ACC. We saw Virginia Tech get upset by Vanderbilt. Nothing against Vanderbilt, but the only way you should lose to Vanderbilt is on like the debate team, right? You shouldn't lose to Vanderbilt on the football field. Not a good mark for Virginia Tech there. How about Florida State? They're 0-2 with two really just ugly defeats, right? Florida State definitely does not look like a contender at all. They look like they're struggling. And of course, Clemson got totally and unequivocally outclassed by the Georgia Bulldogs in what was supposed to be one of the key marquee matchups of the opening kickoff weekend. You look at programs like Clemson that have not embraced NIL, they have not embraced the transfer portal, and then we've seen them struggle. You see a program like Florida State that totally has. They've been big on NIL and big on transfer portals, but yet we see the difference, right? It doesn't matter if their competition, Miami's competition is Florida State, big in the transfer portal, big in NIL, or a program like Clemson that deliberately avoids it. Miami has proven itself to outclass their competition in how they execute their strategy, and I think really what it comes down to is they're just smarter, right? You don't out execute based on luck. You do it by being smarter. You're more intelligent. You're more efficient. You execute better. And I think this was sort of the promise of bringing Cristobal into the fold, along with the big dollars and along with the deliberate intention to use the transfer portal and in the NIL. And look, it's worked out for them so far. I get it. It's one game, a lot of overreactions one way or the other. But from what we saw at Florida the other day, it made it very clear that the strategy Miami has been building over the past couple of years seems to be heading in the right track. And I think all credit has to be given to Mario Cristobal. He proved himself to be the right guy so far. And when you compare it to what Miami's doing to what's going on in Florida State and Tallahassee, what's going on in Clemson, you look at programs like Virginia Tech, you sit there and say, look, they were just smarter. They outperformed the top competition in the ACC, and everyone understands it. As it is today, the Miami Hurricanes are back on top in that conference, and I think it's undeniably so.
Yeah, Nick, and I think there's a lot of good things that have been built at Miami. I think, their athletic department has a really good leader in Dan Radakovich. This is a guy who he was at Clemson before he was at Miami. He saw Clemson be built up from 2012 to 2021. And I think, in that time period, he probably as well saw the downfall of Clemson, the, straying away from the NIL era, straying away from what people were saying, that's the future. Clemson pushed back on that, but he also saw them build up the huge team. So I think he was able to see the blend of, we need the top tier recruiters. We need the Mario Cristobal's of the world. Dabo Sweeney is a really great recruiter as well. I think that's his, shining point. But his, negligence of not using the NIL, that was also a downfall. So I think this is a guy who had the foresight and Radakovich that he was able to get the perfect culmination of things for Miami. Get top tier recruiters like Mario Cristobal, be able to implement the NIL because we all know Miami has tons of money. I think we did a story a few months back about Cam Ward and his introduction to the school and just they're going to start injecting him all over the state of Florida and well, really just in Miami area probably. But they're really going to use this NIL era to kind of just flip things on its head. This new Canes Connection NIL collective really had some great ideas of what they were going to do with the players that were in the NIL. So I think it's a really good sign that Miami, they've got a great future. I know they want to raise a lot of money going forward. It's going to be expensive to continue this train. I think they've got a really great start to things. And I think this team is in the right path going forward. They have embraced everything they need to do, and we see the wins on the field now.